Hello, friends. Welcome back. Today's guest is someone I have been wanting to bring in to this conversation for a while, and she is also a member of our collective co-op, so it feels extra special. Cris Valerio started her career as a financial journalist on Bloomberg TV, spent a decade inside Silicon Valley at places like Uber and Instacart, and then walked away from all of it as a family breadwinner with two toddlers at home to build something smaller and closer on purpose. Cris founded Main Street Operator to bring the kind of AI and product discipline that billion-dollar companies use and translates it for small business owners who don't have a team of engineers or a venture capital budget. And she has a framework that we're going to go through today that I think is going to completely change how you think about AI in your business. Play freely, deploy carefully. They are different sports, and most of us are getting them confused. So in this episode, we are getting into how to actually spot where AI pays off in your business and why bolting on random AI tasks just creates more work. Plus, we talk about having fun, leaning into technology, and really building a business that you are passionate about. So let's get into it. Hi, Cris. Welcome to the Crush the Rush podcast. I'm so excited you're here.
Hi, Holly. I am thrilled to be here.
Yes. I always say Cris is like a unicorn that flew into my inbox because she's just like a wealth of knowledge of so many things. And every time I speak with you, I just love learning from you. But before we dive in, you have just such a cool background. And so I want to ask a couple of questions. And the first one is, what does building a life first business mean to you right now?
I really appreciate you asking this because I think about it a lot. No surprise. I'm fairly new into running my own business. And so it's something that comes top of mind on a regular basis. So for me, a life first business means that I get to decide the magnitude and the direction of my ambition. So let me explain what I mean by that. I think that sometimes, especially right now, we're living in kind of this anti-ambition world, and it's not cool to want things. And I actually love my ambition. I love that I'm ambitious about my career and my kids and my athletic goals and I just got into quilting, so many things. And so I really just, for me, life first means refusing to shrink that, but being able to show up and point it where I want to. So that is kind of the way that I think about it for my business.
Yeah, I love this. I do know that you have two young girls and you're scaling your own business. Can you give us a little example of what that might look like for you?
Yeah. So I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, two girls about to be 4 and 2, which feels crazy. And I left my corporate job in December and officially launched my business in February. Right now it's July for context of anyone listening to this later on. And what that means for me right now is that it is a lot of pressure on making sure it works. But also the most interesting part of it is a lot of presence when I'm not at work, which is something that's different from when I was in my corporate role, right? And so on a day-to-day basis, it just means I'm doing all the regular things of toddler moms, trying to regulate myself, get them to daycare, be sure to have fun and play with them. And then from a business perspective, it's really both the delivery of what I'm doing for my clients, as well as teaching myself things like sales and implementing a lot of processes with regards to my content and marketing strategy. Biz dev is a huge part of it, right? Especially when you're starting a business. And so really just kind of managing it. I think the best part is it's really getting to use my curious brain a lot more. I think I'd gotten to a point in my career where I was really just doing a lot of the same stuff, and I'm getting to start to learn a lot more now.
Yeah. For my listeners who maybe have been in a corporate role or are in a corporate role, it's a big step to sort of step out of that. And so I would love to give us a little context of what made you decide to take that next step? What was the thing that you were like, okay, it's time to do this?
Yeah. So I think I'd love to give some context on my career because I'm very proud of my career and I love the work that I've gotten to do. So I actually started my career as a financial news journalist on Wall Street. It's actually interesting because when I look back, the entire kind of intersection of what I've done has been at the same spaces. So I left Wall Street. Let me actually start over. Holly, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So I started my career as a financial news journalist on Wall Street and did that for about 6, 7 years, ended up actually transferring out to Silicon Valley. And it was there that I was interviewing all these kind of founders and CEOs of tech companies like Facebook, like if you remember Zynga at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, these dudes aren't that much smarter than me. And now they've built incredible companies, but I really realized I wanted to build and do stuff alongside them. And so I ended up leaving journalism and joining an innovation consultancy called IDEO, which led into being in product across multiple hypergrowth companies like Uber and Instacart. And I think the reason I point all that out is because I love the fact that I've had a varied career. And yet the things that I've done have been the same, which is you take a lot of complex inputs, you distill them into an actionable output. For journalism, it's a story that somebody can trade on. Building products at tech companies, it's taking a lot of inputs and building a product that somebody will solve somebody's problem. And so that theme has been consistent throughout, and I love it. And so when I decided to leave corporate, part of it was that I saw what large language models were doing from the perspective of kind of collapsing the distance between what enterprise tech can do and what small businesses can do. And I think there's a lot to be said there. I think the other is I got tired of building for the demand side. And what I mean by that is so much of the technology in the world right now exists on the people that are paying for it, but not the people that are fulfilling on that technology, right? And so, for instance, at Uber, those would be the drivers, the supply side. At Instacart, those would be the shoppers. And what happens when you build and design technology just for the payers is you lose the value in the efficiency and the design, in the experience of being human on the actual operations and logistics side. And so that also was something that led me to decide I really, really want to work with operators that are at this intersection of really hard problems, but solve for them in a unique and interesting way. And so I don't know if that fully explains why, but that's kind of the opportunity I saw.
Yeah. And so if I was to sort of paraphrase what you said, it's really leaning into giving small businesses the same opportunity to invest and build in technology that helps them maybe get to the next level without the intimidation of there's no way I could do this.
Or the cost, right? I mean, you talk about collapsing the asymmetry, the power asymmetry and the cost asymmetry. It's pretty amazing. The last thing I want to say, because I know I just gave a lot of jargon there, is I also just really wanted to be fully deployed. And I think a lot of your listeners can understand what this means. I'm a human-centered former journalist, MBA turned technologist, and I was in roles that felt very one-sided. And I wanted to bring my full self to what I can build. And so I think that that's a really important call out.
Yeah. So let's dig into technology a little bit. And you say frequently, play freely, deploy carefully. And you sort of like touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about this in the context of when you have your own business and you're thinking about whether it's AI or some other technical feature. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, when new things come from a technology perspective, I think it can be really intimidating and it can freeze us up a bit. And my number one goal in life is to play a lot. And so I say play freely because I think that we don't take the idea of our businesses and learning and technology with enough lightness. And so the first thing I want to tell everyone is just find time in your week to play, to learn things, right? And I know, Holly, you do this a ton, but playing is how you start to feel more familiar, less intimidated, and excited about the entire ecosystem, right? I think that when I say deploy carefully, what I want to say with that is there is a difference between personal AI productivity and how it can help you get faster and help you with lots of different things in your life versus what I would consider like company AI. And that is you have clients, you have products, you have employees, and there's a different level of rigor and governance that you want to bring to that. And so while these tools can really collapse your ability to do this stuff, you want to make sure that you're buttoning up that last 20% because a lot is at stake, right? Your livelihood, your employees' livelihood, your risk factors. And so that's kind of where I say play, enjoy, learn what it can do, see yourself in the use cases, and then go build it in a way that will also scale with you and your team.
Yeah, I love this. I want to highlight the playing part because Chris is currently a member of our collective co-op. And I feel like this is where you and I like just riff off of each other because we're like, oh my gosh, I just spent like 30 minutes digging into XYZ, or I just spent 20 minutes and I figured out that it could do this. And it's not like we're trying to solve a problem per se. I mean, maybe we are, but it's just been I think it's fun to see that there's a fun side of learning a new piece of technology. And I think with all the new technology that is coming out, taking the time to set aside to be like, maybe it'll give me an answer I want, maybe it won't, but it'll at least be fun to play with has been really cool to see some of the things that you've built.
Yeah, I feel like you and I jive a lot on that type of stuff. And I mean, anybody with kids knows this, right? And anybody who's played in any sports knows this. The minute it's not fun, it becomes harder to actually learn and grow because play is just so vital into who we are as humans. So,
yeah. Yeah. So good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you call shadow AI. Tell me what that means and what can we think about it as a maybe different approach?
Yeah, I think, okay, so shadow AI refers to how people are using AI on your team or around you in ways that you're not aware of. They call it shadow AI. It sounds like a villain, right? But I think the two pieces of guidance I want to give business owners here, because I know some of your listeners are like single entrepreneurs, and then others are potentially owner operators who have a little bit of staff or larger employees. And I think that what is first and foremost, most important is you need to be paying for your AI tools because, as they say, if you are not paying, you are the product, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing I say when I think about shadow AI is, are you actually paying for any AI tools? Because that actually gives you some protection from your data being trained on, right? Number one. So that's the first thing. And number two, when I say shadow AI, I'd say it's really important to have some kind of policy, right? If you want your team to play around with it, that's great. Let them know that, right? But be sure you're paying for a subscription to whatever you're doing. It's also important to ask yourself, where is AI playing a role and where it's not? If your salespeople are using it to script emails, is that within the voice, right, of your team? Mm-hmm. There's just so many different things that you may not be aware of. And the first thing you need to do is just have an idea of the constraints and the structure so that you don't have shadow AI playing out in your business without you knowing.
Yeah, so good. Where do you see this maybe take place in a negative way that we can sort of watch out for?
I mean, the obvious use case, Holly, and I hate to say this, but we've all experienced this, is in customer support, right? So how many businesses, and to be really clear, I work with a lot of local service businesses. So we're talking about your drywall contractors, we're talking about your real estate agencies, we're talking about, the large property management companies, let's say, or local healthcare agencies. And a lot of people want to plug in AI and customer support because that's where there's a lot of labor costs and a lot of kind of repetitive tasks of answering the same questions. Mm-hmm. The problem is that they will hand one piece of that off, right? So maybe they'll try to do voice AI or they'll hand off kind of the automated response emails. But when that is not done thoughtfully, appropriately, and built in a way that will continue to improve, we all know how much that experience sucks because we've all gotten those texts. I mean, I actually right now have been getting a lot of texts from a local tree cutting business, and it's very interesting to see. And I always try to test it by responding and seeing how it's going to engage with me. And I think that, again, at the end of the day, your quality of what you provide your clients from a product or service perspective really matters. And so you want to be sure that any of those touch points with customers are happening in a way that meets your quality bar.
Yeah. It's interesting because I get a lot of like service provider pitches in terms of like, hire me to do this or hire me to do this. And as we're talking about this morning, I got like a 9-paragraph email that was so AI. And I was like, wow. Like, I really liked this person. If they took the time to actually respond, even if there was like a spelling error or something, like I probably would have engaged. But instead, I was completely turned off because I could tell that it was like a copy and paste from something else.
I like to call that lazy AI. I was actually talking to a real estate agency client that I was working with, and they had a broker that also emailed them, and they realized that this broker was entirely responding by AI and they were entirely turned off like you. So that person lost a partner, right? And so this has real downstream implications, especially from a partnership perspective, from a customer perspective, et cetera. I 100% agree. So don't be lazy, y'all. build it right,
Yeah.
do it right. And I think what you're hitting at, Holly, is really important, which is there is a line between what makes you so special and different because it's intimately human,
Hmm.
and how to create efficiencies, better margins, better growth in your business, right? And that line is something only you can define. That's not
Yeah.
something I can define. That's not something somebody else can define. You have to know where that line is and then build appropriately.
Yeah, this is a great segue because I feel like we're in a scenario now where everyone's selling something to a bot, a skill, whatever, to like make the tasks faster. And in this, we'll just use the email scenario. It didn't. It didn't make it faster. They actually lost me right away. So I would love to know, we both love AI, but also like what is something you can do to make the workflow feel like you, not random? Like what are some best practices that you're seeing?
I think I'm going to answer from like a framework perspective, and then we get down to a specific example, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the same, AI is a tool, and that tool is changing rapidly and doing incredible things. However, it doesn't change like fundamentals to business practices and stuff that has been studied forever. So as an example, there's a body of study called like operational research, OR. And one of the things that OR has consistently shown is when you just bring a tool into one part of a full workflow, it actually makes that workflow more onerous. It creates more problems, et cetera, right? Whereas if you come and you apply the tool to the entire workflow, you actually get more benefit. And so what I see happening a lot is people bolting AI into parts of a full workflow. And I'm very operations heavy, right? So you might be talking about marketing, but I might be talking about labor management or
Hmm.
scheduling or something, right? And so the first thing is to think about like, what is a workflow that you could apply it across the entire workflow? So I want to give you a very specific example. There was a client that we were working with that was in the food business. And, every food service kitchen has cameras and they have hourly labor staff, right? Now, cameras, oftentimes the way we use security cameras is we just look when something goes wrong, right? That's like a way that you have a tool, you have a human that's bolted in. What we ended up doing was pulling the cameras and applying some computer vision, which is very easy. I know that sounds fancy, but it's not that hard. And then cross-referencing that with an LLM to see their labor data, which is to say, we could say, we know there are only supposed to be 4 people in the kitchen right now. And if there was an extra person in the kitchen, we would shoot the manager an email. What that allowed the team to do, which did happen, was say, why is there somebody extra in the kitchen right now? And have a proactive discussion about why somebody's friend was in the kitchen during a shift, right? And so I think that to me is a really interesting perspective on the way that you can apply tools and automations, which is you brought that full workflow in. And what you did was actually create a much more human moment versus a responsive moment to just what happened when it went wrong, right? And so again, the big takeaway there is just like be thoughtful instead of bolting it into processes. Think how can you bring the full workflow into the tooling to create more of those human moments? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I love this because I feel like you use the whatever the AI tool was or whatever the tool is to acknowledge what was going wrong, but then inserted like a human conversation to figure out. I mean, maybe you used AI to figure out how to fix it, but you at least had the human conversation to figure out what the next step is. And so I think that's an example that like anyone could apply to any scenario. I'm curious for our listeners, we talked a lot about like do's and don'ts and like best practices, but if they want to just like play around with AI this week, sort of as you describe, what's something fun that you've been doing or like an experiment that would be fun for them to do?
I mean, I have so many ideas, but I want to give one really practical and then I'll give a fun one. Okay. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the very tactical one I want to give is I think there's a lot of fear around people of like, what tool do I use? Claude or Chat, or if I'm a bro, maybe Grok, like, I don't know. Right. And I think the most important thing you can start to do and play around with is thinking about transferability. So you actually don't need to choose one tool. If you build out the right, I know this sounds really boring, folder system on your computer. And so this is what I want you to do is I just want you to literally go onto your computer and create a folder and call it your business brain. And in that folder, write a few documents about like what you like to sound like, what your offers are, maybe some testimonials from your customers. And then anytime you use any AI tool, just point that folder, point the AI tool to that folder. And that will start to teach you what transferability looks like as you're starting to build out different parts of your business on AI. So that's like the first very tactical thing I would say. The fun one is every time I tell people this, I think they are like, what? That's possible. So for my business, I spend a lot of time doing in-person networking, in-person events. No surprise, service businesses really don't trust things online. They want to meet you and see you. And so I talk to a lot of people in person. And I always have trouble trying to remember who to follow up with, or it takes a really long time and it's kind of annoying. Everybody who's networked or done this knows what it's like. So there's an app called Whisper. I know you love it and use it. I literally go and whisper into my Whisper in the bathroom in between kind of meeting people. And I say, I met so-and-so and this is who they are. And this is what they gave me. This is what I'm super interested in following up in them. And I do that in real time. When I leave the event, I send those to Claude, to my LLM. And I have it draft follow-up emails. So when I come in the next day, I actually just go into my drafts and I see follow-up emails. I added a few notes, and then I send them off. And that has saved me so much time and had an excellent ROI from the perspective of sales and biz dev.
I love this. I feel like you should give us like 10 more examples because those were so good. I use Whisper, but I never thought to do that. And my process is, and I've like taught this before, is as soon as I get in the car, I like write it down because I'm afraid that I'm going to forget it. And then I like go home and, do whatever I need to do.
Honestly, you could write it down and just take a picture and then send that to your LLM. I just think it's so much easier.
Yeah, but no, this is way better. So much better. Yeah, so good. Okay, I want to skip to a couple of fun rapid fire, and that is, what is one piece of advice that everyone repeats that you think is just wrong right now?
I think people say that, let me retalk. Okay. I think AI is both overhyped and underestimated. Okay. So what I mean by that is that it's kind of like owning a home. Everyone's like, oh, home ownership, especially in the US, right? It's amazing. It's the best thing ever. And you buy the house and it's like this huge drop in like, oh my gosh, the cost of this house and the repairs and the, everything. But then once you've had it for a while, you're like, oh, this is amazing. I'm building my family here. Look at the yard. It's so fun to do these things. And so I feel like AI is somewhat like that, which is, it is both way overhyped on social and it is not going to do half of the things that they're telling you, or it's not going to do them well, like we've discussed. The bottom side of that is that it actually will change your business more than you realize. And so you have to, again, this is where I talk about AI is so personal. Any tooling is so personal. You have to find that middle ground and where you kind of collapse into this middle mean for yourself.
Yeah, so good. I think when I look back at like how we've used AI over the last 2 years, I feel like our business is so different right now, but I think it's speed. It's the speed that I can do things. And I think sometimes I have to slow myself down, mainly because of my personality, where I'm like, oh, I can get this done in a weekend. So I'm curious, like, are there any like guardrails that you have created to slow yourself down because of that?
Yeah. And I actually, if you don't mind me pushing a little bit back on that, Holly, I think speed is the most immediate feedback loop you get, but speed actually doesn't solve problems, really. Speed actually just creates more space for you to do more things. And if you don't apply that to the right space, like the right aspect in your business, it doesn't get you an ROI. And so I've been spending a lot of time into some of these studies that are coming out right now. And so I actually think there's yes, there's guardrails around that, but you should be asking yourself, how is it increasing kind of your trust in what you are delivering and doing, and or increasing the quality of what you are doing and delivering? And I think those things really matter. So speed is the initial kind of, when you start to lift weights, you're like, whoa, I can lift so much more now.
Yeah.
But what you really need to find is kind of that is the other gains, right? Like, oh, my back doesn't hurt as much when I run, or whatever comes from that.
Yeah. So good. I love when guests push back. Those are the best conversations.
Speed is amazing. I just think that is kind of the level feedback loop of AI right now.
Yeah. And I think it's making sure that if you're moving faster and you are creating space to do other things, that you're spending the time doing other things that actually need to be done and aren't just like busy work because you got a suggestion that you should do it, right?
100%. And to be clear, I still struggle with this in my own business. It's way easier to do with other people's businesses.
Right? Yes, totally. What's the most used app in your business toolkit right now?
I mean, Claude Code. I could talk about the differences, but I really appreciate the coding side because it will just take action for me. It will do stuff. We can build tools, but I don't want to scare people away, non-technical people. You don't need to use Claude Code.
Yeah.
That's what I use a lot of.
Yeah. And I feel like this is where Chris and I have like bantered back and forth because I'm sort of in the middle. I use Claude Cowork the most, but I do think leaning into Cowork or code because that's really the time saver. That's really where instead of just brainstorming and I always say like, God, it just takes a minute. Like, what are you doing when it's thinking? The code or the Cowork piece is like scheduling things or updating pages. It's the piece that's like doing the work. And I think that's the piece that people need to get to so they can see, the fruits of their labors in terms of just creating more work.
Yeah. And I just want to say to anyone again who is newer to this, when in doubt, just ask, right? Hey, what do I use this for? Literally just ask for it. Say, this is my context. How should I use you, right? Or if you're experimenting in code, say, this is my first coding session. What should I do? Like, just ask it and it will start to give you ideas and feedback.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Okay, we're going to like regroup full circle. And that is, as you've built Main Street Operator, which is so different sort of than what you were doing in corporate, what's the most glamorous and the least glamorous part of doing that?
I think that the idea of building your own company and being an entrepreneur is just from a cultural perspective, both coming from Silicon Valley and, in the US, a glamorous thing, right? And I think that, again, that is both overhyped and underestimated. So I think that feels very glamorous. The reality is the least glamorous part is I didn't realize building a company really is about what are the sales loops you really want to be in. And I think actually, Holly, you do an excellent job around this because Holly's business, the sales loops she really enjoys being in are around kind of automated content creation. And that's a beautiful sales loop that works for her life and her business and the way she likes it. And I think that can work for all of our businesses too, to be clear. But I do think one of the least glamorous parts is understanding what is that loop I want to do every single day, every week, every month, every year from a sales motion perspective as I'm building this business, and learning that and doing it is really unglamorous.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great piece of feedback. I feel like I always say on repeat, like what's something that you can do consistently from a sales perspective. And you kind of have to find that like happy place where it doesn't feel icky and salesy, but it is something that you have to do consistently. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I want to ask one question, and that is, you are part of our collective co-op program. And for me, it's really cool to see. I feel like we attract all kinds of different clients, but you came from like big teams, big platforms, big corporate, which is similar to where I came from. Like, what made you crave a smaller room?
Yeah, I honestly think it was less about the size of the room and more about who was in it. So I come from tech, and in tech, it's VC funding, jargon, hyper competitive, everything measured in 10x return. And I wanted to be around people that were not blinded by that lens, right? I think that lens is perfectly applicable to certain types of businesses, and it was not the type of business I wanted to build. And so I think sitting next to a lactation consultant and a woman running a farm and a social media agency, that's the best thing for my brain. And it gives me distance from this very narrow definition of success. And it's beautiful and amazing. And plus, I'll just say, like, being next to hella ambitious women that are also moms and also supporting their family is great.
Yeah, I love this. Since you started, what do you think the activity or action is that has moved the needle the most for you?
Leaning into the process. So I am a very outcome oriented human. I think that there's pros and cons that come with that. And I think this and parenting have taught me more than anything. It's actually about the process, not about the outcome. And so, I'm a new-ish parent and I'm a super newbie entrepreneur, and both of them are teaching me the process is the point. And I know that's very cheesy, but yeah, it is very true.
Yeah, I love this so much. One last sort of final reflection is what would you tell the version of yourself about building this now after you've started versus where you were several years ago?
I wish I had started earlier, Holly. I think, you know, I think choosing, I also want to be really clear about my journey. I started this as a side hustle so that I could make enough money and prove to myself that it was okay to leap. And I want to say that
Mhm.
to everyone because it is a really huge decision, especially when you are supporting your family. But what I realized, part of the reason I left, as I mentioned, was the market opportunity, the desire to be fully deployed. But the other thing I haven't mentioned was I wanted to accrue value to the things that matter to me, whether that's my values, my community, or my family, right?
Mhm.
Versus accruing value to these like huge corporate institutions or a bunch of dudes. And so I think what I most wish I had told myself earlier was I didn't have to have it figured out. I'm going to figure it out as I go. And I wish I had started this earlier.
Yeah. Such good advice. I feel like there are so many notes that I would be taking on this if I was listening live because I wrote so many down as we were chatting. If you can't tell, Cris is a whiz in the technology space, but also just in the space of let's just embrace sort of what's coming and learn the next step. Cris, where can people learn more about what you're doing, what you're sharing, and how you're helping Main Street operators?
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I just want to reiterate to anyone listening, you can do this with a plan and focus on the process. And I'm very curious where I will be in a year or two. So, this is all part of the journey. If you want to learn more about Main Street Operator, and if the only AI you've seen is really like how to make your emails faster or better, but you haven't seen the version that actually applies to the operations of your business and your team, I did build a 2-minute survey. You go to mainstreet-operator.com/quiz. And what it does is it figures out what are the blocks and the walls in your business currently and where AI could potentially apply there. I will also say it tells you exactly what not to waste your money on, which I think is equally important because, at least in my experience, a lot of businesses want to throw money at a tool to solve a problem. And that's unfortunately just not the answer, even though it could be faster, it creates more work at the end. So please reach out for anything. Mainstreetoperator.com/quiz is where that lives. And you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cris. This was so great. Thank you again.